Welcome to the Executive Coaching Podcast, where Executive Coach Alicia Cowan will discuss leadership topics and coaching solutions to tackle the most difficult problems that keep you from leading your team to success.
Hey, executive leaders, all of my listeners, I have a big announcement, and I need your help in order to make this happen. We are coming up on episode number 100 of the Executive Coaching Podcast. It's actually going to air later this year in September. And I don't want to just celebrate that big milestone by talking to myself. I actually want to celebrate it with you, my listeners. And so here's what I'm looking for. If there's something that you've heard on this podcast, any episode at all, that has helped you, has changed how you lead, how you think, or how you operate as an executive leader in or outside of the workplace. I want to hear about it from you. Maybe it's a decision that you've made differently. Maybe it's a framework or a tool that you used that you brought to your team. Maybe it's a conversation that you finally had. If there is a result that happened because of something you picked up here on the podcast, big wins, small wins, all of it matters. Because what I really want to do with episode 100 is I don't want it to be me just looking back on the 100 episodes that I've had. I want it to be reflective of your experience. Your stories are what will help shape this episode. The things you've applied, the shifts you've made, the moments where something clicked, that's what I want to bring to other listeners. Because I know if those tools help to resonate with you, there are really good chances that it is exactly what somebody else needs and what they need to hear right now. So some stories that I have heard just recently in the past few weeks. I recently just had a consult with a client that has been a listener since 2024, so going on 2 years. And she was in a place where she started listening to the podcast to use in her workplace and how she was interacting with people. She recently just reached out for a consult. She got a big promotion, and now she's a client. I had a listener just this past couple weeks reach out to me from overseas, from the Middle East, and has been listening to this on his commute into work, which is fantastic. And again, chasing after that next level. Now we're using it to elevate executive presence. And there are tools that I've heard that you've used over the years. Clients interacting with their supervisors and bosses in a different way, the board a different way. I had someone negotiate a raise and tell me about it. So there's all these cool stories that I've heard. And what I'd love to curate is a picture of all of these episodes, tools, lessons, topics that have had the most real world impact told through the people who actually lived it. Not this highlight reel of my favorite moments, but a reflection of what you, the listeners, found most valuable. So share your story with me. Tell me what you've heard, what you did with it, what changed in your career, your team, the way you lead. A few sentences is all it takes to get started. So to share it, easy. Just go to my website, which is always linked in the show notes, and click the section where it says you can contact me directly, and you can also email me. Really easy. My email is Alicia, Elisia, at Alicia Cowan Coaching, ELISIAKEOWN coaching.com. And the website, same thing. It's aliciacowancoaching.com. So easy way to reach me. Would love to hear from you. Thanks always for listening, friends. Here's to upcoming 100. Hey there, executive leaders. Welcome to the Executive Coaching Podcast. We are on episode number 94. And as I record this, it's midsummer. We're in the thick of summer. And I love this season because it's such a fun time. I think it's my favorite season, but I think it's such a fun time for just a change of pace. It's summer, right? So a lot of times that means vacations and holidays and time to do a different pace, connect with people we care about, do a different routine than we're just used to. It's really going to just continue the conversation into our topic for the day. We are going to talk about more about you being the executive asset. So I want to thank a client for this episode idea. We were talking about this concept. I alluded to it into my last episode of the podcast where we talked about the executive calendar blueprint, where we're talking about time and how you're using it, how you're protecting your calendar and your time as an executive, and especially putting yourself at the center of it, being the executive asset. And when I was talking to my client about this, she's like, you need to talk about this on the podcast. It's such a different viewpoint of looking at it. So thank you for the idea. And I want to introduce this to you of you as an executive being the asset. I have heard this idea from a coach that I will credit, Stacey Bayman, who talks about it in the entrepreneurial sense as being the asset within your business and to your business as an executive. I'm going to translate it into the corporate world, right? To translate being to the executive asset within a corporation. Same fantastic concept. And so I really want to dive into what this really means. Because as we're in summer and we are looking at ourselves as the asset, I'm going to give a shout out to my clients as they look at themselves differently as an asset within their life. And the things that help protect the asset are things that fill the asset back up. And so we're going to talk about what those buckets can look like. But I will share client wins, like looking at themselves differently could include things like within the workplace, giving themselves time, giving themselves strategic thinking time. Maybe it's outside of work. Maybe it's planning time with loved ones for connection, making their own summer vacation plans, scheduling much needed, long overdue doctor's appointments. Perhaps it's like some of my clients that are saving time by outsourcing things to a person or to technology. And so giving away tasks and delegating and outsourcing things that they were previously doing themselves in order to buy back time. And some are using coaching as investing in the asset to invest in themselves and their own development. I want to shout out to our clients that are taking this time in order to develop themselves to the next level. So those are some of the ideas. We'll get into really like breaking it down as we like to do, but I want to share those client wins because I want to offer you, if those things are resonating as things that sound beautiful and lovely and things that you want, you too can have it just like my clients. And you looking at yourself in this season of whatever time of year that you're listening to this, but again, as I'm recording this, it is summer 2026, but you looking at yourself in the season and saying, what sounds amazing in order to support myself as an asset in this season of life that I'm in. So we're going to start with this. If you're an executive, you over time, you've protected the balance sheet of your business. You've protected the brand. You have protected market share. But when is the last time that you've protected yourself as an asset within this business? And I'm not just talking about your reputation. I'm talking about you, your energy, your clarity, your capacity to actually lead. Because here's now what no one tells you when you reach the C-suite level. You are now the highest stakes asset in the building. And most executives are running that asset into the ground. So I want to tell you a story. There was a client that I had who genuinely believed they were performing at their best. And in some ways they were. The results were still good. The output was high. The calendar was full. They were, if you looked at from outside looking in, busy, which also felt very productive for them. But here's what they didn't see. Behind all of that busyness and production What they didn't see is that over time, their decisions started to take a little bit longer. They were delegating less and holding on to more. They were in more meetings, not fewer meetings. And the meetings that they were in, they didn't feel like were productive. People were coming unprepared. Their thinking had narrowed from being big picture strategic to highly operational and tactical. And there was this moment of truth. There was this specific moment in question, a question that came up in coaching. And it went something like, when was the last time that you had a genuinely strategic thought that wasn't reactive? And it was a question they couldn't answer in that moment. And so this is the very dangerous version of what we'll call depletion because it's invisible to the person that is experiencing it. An outsider looking in or even being in the moment, it felt productive. And so if you recognize yourself in this, or maybe it's someone that you lead, this episode may resonate for you. So here's what we're going to do. This isn't today is not about just like a wellness conversation. It's actually much more than that. It's a performance and executive presence conversation. That's the deal. So it's not just fluffy self-care. It truly is thinking about yourself as an asset. And you are the asset that no one's actually managing. So here's a paradox that we have. As executives, we actually obsess over capital and capital allocation, but yet we at times chronically will underinvest in ourselves. And that cost for us, it's not personal, it's actually organizational. What can happen is the impact and outcomes could be the degraded judgment, slower decisions that we're making, very visible depletion to others, and your teams and your colleagues, they'll notice often way before you do. And so if you're in an organization where you have a board that's tracking EBITDA, they're actually looking at it very closely, right? They're monitoring it week over week, quarter over quarter, right? But nobody is actually tracking your executive capacity. That's your job. But everybody in the organization can feel it. So that's what I wanted to drive home here. The point I make about executive presence over and over again throughout my podcast and my coaching is that executive presence isn't just about polish. It's not about how we speak and how we look, although again, those are components. It can also be the signal that radiates from you when you walk into a room. And so if you're depleted, you're going to emit this different vibe and signal and energy when you come into a room. You can feel it, even if you're not saying it. So if your words aren't right, something feels off. People can sense the reactivity that happens within you. They can sense the absence. They can sense somebody managing their day and trying to just get through the busyness of it all rather than like leading it and really commanding their time. Here's the deal. You cannot perform executive presence. As much as we think we can like put on a brave face and just power through it, people can actually feel the condition that you're operating from. I was helping a client recently that had a really high stakes meeting. And when they walked into the meeting, something was just off and people could feel it. It wasn't their words. They were highly prepared. It wasn't their preparation. It's actually in the energy that I'm talking about. So as the meeting went on, questions started increasing. The confidence in this leader in the room was subtly eroding. And this leader thought it was a communication problem. They were like questioning what they said, how they said it, but it wasn't about the communication at all. It was actually this depletion problem that I'm talking about in a communication mask, if you will. And so finally, we figured it out and named what everybody in the room was sensing. The leader was showing up physically and actually in a pretty powerful way in the sense of presenting, but not fully present from their energy sense. And so If you are an executive, you've either seen this in another person, or maybe worked alongside someone, or maybe even felt it yourself. But it takes this invisible concept that I'm talking about and can make it very visible when you sense somebody's energy and you're in the room with them. Everything may be going right, but there might be this subtle, intangible energy that can be sensed without the words. That's what I'm talking about here. And again, it doesn't always show up in exactly this way, but this is one way that we can start to detect if we're not protecting ourselves as this asset that I'm describing. So let's talk about it. What are three major assets that C-suite leaders chronically mismanage? So, assets and asset protection, let's talk about it. When we're thinking about protecting the asset, there are big buckets that I want to talk about. The first one is time. How are you protecting the asset? By protecting your time. Now, I talked a little bit about this in the previous episode in regards to the executive calendar. This is related, so I'm not going to belabor the point. You can listen to the previous episode and dive into it. But the point of this is that reactive leaders will spend time. A strategic leader is actually going to design their time and design their week, their month, their quarter. They're going to proactively determine what are their priorities and does their calendar reflect that leadership. If your calendar doesn't protect your time, does it protect the time that you need to think, that you need to rest, recover, that you need to get your work done? You are just then managing what is being put on your calendar. You're defaulting to what meetings are being sent your way, what work's being sent your way, and you're just going through the motions. You're not actually leading. And so protecting your time in and outside of work, my friend, is super important and the number one way we protect the asset being you. The second asset protection point that I want to talk about is your energy. So we can have two executives with two very identical calendars with completely different output. And the difference is how they're managing their energy. So, how do you manage your energy? Couple ways. You have to know what depletes me, what will restore me, also where your highest value thinking happens. Only you can know that. No one on the outside can tell you what makes sense to you. You really have to know yourself, understand your energy, and know the things that will help you restore that energy. Because again, your energy can be felt. And so you taking care of it is you taking care of this high value asset that you have. The third is health. Now, health can encompass a lot of different things. I don't just mean physical health. A lot of people think physical health as the number one. But when I say health, I want to encompass financial health. I want to encompass mental health. I want to encompass, of course, wellness and physical health. But we're talking about all of it. And this is not something that's just personal at the C suite level. This actually, your health, all encompassing, affects everything. Sleep, for example, can affect your judgment in the workplace. If you are stressed and you're chronically stressed, it can actually take out communication and clear communication. Physical, mental burnout, it doesn't always announce itself. It actually can show up very subtly in your leadership before you even name it. And so many executives I see trying to wear working long hours and pushing through and doing what needs to be done no matter what as like this sign of and this badge of honor. And I'm not just talking about the one-off situations here. We've all been in situations where we need to persevere and we need to get the job done no matter what. But when you're doing that over and over again, leading by the example of we work through all of this lack of health, you're not protecting yourself and then therefore the outcomes that you're expected to produce at the executive level. Let me share a real story about a presentation that really revealed this in an example. There was a client that I had that was preparing for a major presentation. It was so technically sound, it's beautiful. But what happened during the presentation is that they got rattled in a way that completely took them by surprise. There's a tough question that was asked of them, which then became a moment of friction in the meeting, that awkward that moment, we've seen it happen. And then suddenly that friction turns into reactivity by this leader instead of them remaining composed as they really wanted to. So the leader, when they came to me as a client, they presented this information as if it was a performance issue, as if it was the skill of not presenting well and being reactive. But really, what we did together, we looked at this situation and we looked beyond just the setting of the presentation. And what we discovered, it was more of an energy issue. This leader, when we looked at how they had been running in the past few weeks, they had been running on fumes for a long time period that had led into the meeting, into that moment. And when the pressure hit during that meeting, there wasn't this deep reserve of energy and a well to draw from. So when that meeting took place and we looked at and replayed the tape, it wasn't about that segment. It was about the longer film strip and realizing that preparation for that presentation was not the gap, it was the capacity. That was the issue. And so high stakes presentations are just ubiquitous. And as being an executive, being in the C-suite, it is something that is called and asked of you at a moment's notice and quite frequently. And so sometimes we can look at bad performance and beat ourselves up and we look at it as like a skill issue. But really, this could potentially be how we're resourcing ourselves, how we're taking care of ourselves as an asset. And I want you to have that perspective shift as you look at your own experience. And again, or maybe this, you don't identify this, it might be somebody that works with or for you. So here's what some tangible examples of protecting the asset, what it could really look like. I want to make it a little bit more concrete, not some generic advice here. So let's think about time. I want you to think about your time in and outside of work and some tangible examples. You have to be relentless about this. And again, if you want to go back to my previous episode, I talk a lot about the executive calendar, but you have to be relentless about blocking non-negotiable time for yourself. That could be recovery time, personal time, thinking time, strategy time, but you have to put yourself on your calendar. And it has to be done with the same discipline as you would if you had a meeting with a board. Imagine that you are having a meeting with your own internal board and you've got to take care of yourself as an asset. Okay, so time. That is how you can relentlessly protect yourself as an asset with your time. We talked about energy. Energy is such a term that we use, but really understanding auditing your own energy and how you use it. So, how you could do this to make it tangible is to do an audit. You can audit the way your energy is drained or the way it's refueled. And I want you to audit your energy in a way that you would operate operational efficiency or inefficiency, if you will. You look at it. If you were looking at the operations within your own business, you'd want to make sure it was optimized, that you are taking care of every single little detail and that every nook and cranny was as efficient as it possibly could be in order to maximize profitability, right? So that is the same way that I want you to look at your own energy. Audit it. Look back over the past week, 2 weeks, further if you like, but week to 2 weeks will give you a good quick snapshot. And make sure that making time for replenishing your energy. And that could be in a professional setting. It also could be making time for fun and the stuff that fuels you up and in a way that will help you in the long run be a more effective executive. And then last, we talked about protecting the asset through health. And I said, health is not just physical health, that health can be your financial health, also your mental health, all that wellness wrapped up into one. And tactically, you want to make sure you are building a personal performance infrastructure. What do I mean? Simply advisors, coaching, thinking partners. You want to do that in a way that supports you. So build a personal structure the same way you would build business infrastructure. Outsource if you need to. Find people that you can rely on. Circle and center yourself in a group, a community that will help build you up as the executive that you want to be. I want to say this, the most effective executives that I work with, they're not just disciplined around strategy around the business. They're also disciplined about themselves and strategy around themselves as an asset. Okay, one last story. I want to talk about a leader whose team ended up walking eggshells around them because of where they were at and protecting themselves and their energy. So I had this client that had no clue that their team was managing them in this way. The team was like hesitating. They were choosing what to bring to them and being more careful in bringing everything and not being as transparent as they should be. They were timing the requests very carefully. So they were deciding what can we bring them or not based on their mood, how they're doing. Do we want to bring this to them at this time or wait on it? And they were absorbing decisions very quietly rather than pushing back. So they were afraid to speak up. They were making decisions on their own because they didn't want to escalate them out of what they thought was a protective measure of their boss. Now, the client, they thought that they had a team engagement problem. They're like, no one's engaging with me. People are holding back. And they were actually facing a depletion problem of their own that was leaking into the environment, into the culture. It was affecting their emotional regulation. And the team had actually adapted around it. No one's at fault here. However, what's really important is to understand this work because what this took was a moment of truth of doing a 360 as well as having a really candid coaching conversation to bring this pattern to light. And this feedback, again, it wasn't about the skills. It wasn't about the culture. It was about this version of this leader that was not showing up because they were just maxed. They were totally maxed and the team felt it and then they were managing around it in a negative way. So I want you to understand, sometimes we think leadership and culture and these problems um, are just people problems, right? And they're not necessarily understanding that they're self-management problems, meaning we think it's the people or the team or something outside of ourselves. We don't think of it as how we are managing ourselves and then and how others are experiencing us. And so I want you to be conscious of that thought, whether you're seeing it on your team, in the organization, or potentially within yourself. And so that, my friends, I'm going to tell you, if you are seeing or experiencing any of this, the best leaders and executives, they don't wait until something is broken to bring in outside expertise. They invest in themselves. They invest in performance optimization the same way an elite athlete would. That's why I always say when I'm talking about coaching, coaching is not about remediation and fixing something that's broken. It's the entire infrastructure that I'm talking about. It helps sustain executive presence because it's helping to sustain the executive, you as the asset. All right, friends, in closing, we've talked about you as an asset and you became a C-suite or a senior level executive because you're exceptional at managing what matters most. You can figure out priorities. You can figure out what matters to the business, but you have to remember you are a component of that. And the next level of leadership asks a harder question. Are you managing yourself with the same rigor as you are the business? Your executive presence, your judgment, your capacity to lead, these are not like soft skills. They're not light, fluffy topics. They are the return on the most important asset that your organization has. That's you, my friends. So protect it accordingly. Okay, that is what I have for you today. We are talking all about you as the asset. Now, this combines beautifully with some of the other work. I mentioned my previous podcast. And when we're talking about the executive calendar, you can also look back. This time last year, I was talking about a good summer reset and how to reset for this season. This all can work beautifully and complementary with each other. And if you want more, dive in with me and explore, do you need some support through executive coaching? You can jump on a call with me, go to my podcast show notes, and look up my website. It's aliciacowancoaching.com, ELISIAKEOWN coaching.com. You can book a call with me. It's zero pressure where we talk through what's going on for you. We talk about how I could potentially help and we go from there. I'm so happy to help. As always, friends, thank you for listening. We will see you next time. Bye. All right, my executive friends, that is a wrap on today's episode. But before you go, I want to come back to something I mentioned at the top of the episode because it genuinely matters to me. Episode 100 is coming and I'm so excited about it. I want to build this episode around you, your stories, your wins, the moments where something from this podcast actually showed up in your workplace, in a meeting, in a hard conversation, a decision, a result, you leading with more executive presence. If that is you, if there is a single moment in an episode, maybe a tool, a framework, or even just a small single idea that stuck with you and changed something, I want to hear about it. It doesn't have to be polished. It doesn't have to be some big dramatic transformation. I just wanted to be real. And so the link to share your stories, always in the show notes. You can just go to my website, Alicia Cowan Coaching, and I'll take it from there. Should be quick, take you less than 5 minutes. And I would love if you would let me share it on the podcast, and it might help somebody else out there that needs to hear it right now. So thanks for being here, episode after episode. And 100 of these episodes don't happen without you actually showing up and listening. And I do not take that lightly. I'll see you on the next one, friends. Thanks.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Executive Coaching Podcast with Alicia Cowan. If you're ready to have an executive coach who's ready to help you lead your team to success, then book an introductory call at aliciacowancoaching.com/call.